Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here at this event celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Borlaug. And just to dovetail along with Rob's sort of ending comments, what we're trying to do at Digital Green is to think about how can we bring together information technology together with social organizations to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of agricultural extension. Now, our work started about 8 years ago, initially as a part of Microsoft Research in India, where we initially were actually surveying a bunch of initiatives that were trying to leverage information technology to try to connect farmers with experts. And whether they were using mobile phones or televisions or computers, we found that there was a lot of challenges. The first being sort of accessibility because of the natural sort of local language sort of considerations in these very diverse sort of communities, as well as the whole gamut of rural development challenges, whether it be infrastructure like road and electricities or access to markets and credit, that made it the case that even though we were coming from a very technology sort of point of view, we couldn't just focus on mobile devices or connectivity or computing devices and connectivity alone. Now, as Dr. Borlaug would say, take it to the farmer is the most critical piece of all of the various sort of research initiatives that we've heard over the last few days. And as we all are very familiar with, it's a very difficult and challenging sort of part of agricultural development extension, especially because of the sheer sort of diversity and scale of the communities and the remoteness and difficult terrains that these agricultural extension agents need to kind of cross to be able to motivate and train farmers to adopt new practices as well as technologies to boost their productivities. Now, the government of India in 2005 actually ran a sample survey of farmers where they were looking at the sources of information that farmers were relying upon in the preceding year. And what they found was that the conventional modes of extension, whether they were the extension worker, the broadcast, television, newspaper, and radio programs that have been going on in India for the last 60 years, were reaching a proportionally small number of farmers as compared to the farmers themselves, sharing information with their peers, their family members about what crops they grew and how they grew them, as well as those agro-dealers who were selling them the seeds or fertilizer or pesticides were the major sources of information that farmers were relying upon. So we started off with this assumption that perhaps we can use video for extension, and just as I showed in the previous slide, that's not particularly novel. Video has been used in extension for at least the last 60 years, and in 1964, in fact, there was a publication where people in instructional design thought that video and television could really provide this amplification of extension agents and see sort of the adoption and development of farmers. But what's new is that in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, with the commoditization of various devices, whether they are television sets or cameras or projectors, now this process of producing and sharing content can really be something that's done at the grassroots level. It need not be that you have a professional crew coming in from a place like Delhi or Bombay or Addis or Accra, going out to these rural communities to try to produce a video and then come back and do some elaborate post-production and editing and then distributing these videos across a geography like a country or a state. But rather, now this process of kind of creating and sharing videos can actually be embedded within the existing extension systems of both public, private, and civil society organizations, and where there can be this realization of resource savings, both in terms of human cost and time, and where seeing is believing is the going mantra of extension, video makes some sense. Now, it's one thing to say that video makes some sense. It's another thing to institutionalize sort of the use of video within the context of an existing agricultural extension system. So in 2006, when we started off this work, we spent about 6 months just trying to understand a couple of variables to see how video could be embedded within an existing extension operation. Some of the things that we looked at were who should you feature in these videos, right? You can get a great expert lecture from a university scientist or from a government official. But for farmers who see these videos, they see a great sort of socioeconomic, demographic, educational disconnect between those individuals from themselves, as compared to the training and visit-based approach, which was popularized during the Green Revolution era, which emphasized sort of the focus upon progressive farmers. What we found is that farmers actually want to hear from average and smaller farmers who are much more similar and resource-constrained as themselves. Similarly, once you produce these videos, the question comes, how do you go about sharing this content? So we tried distributing this content over local village cable networks, having a Netflix-style VCD exchange where folks could watch videos at their own choice, even setting up a television set by a chai stand that farmers could come up to and watch videos of their choice. But what we found is that people would often ask questions about which video should I watch? What happens if I have issues? Where do I get various products or services or resources to take information into something that I can translate into some sort of action? What we found as being really important was to have some sort of mediation between the people who are watching the videos and the videos themselves, somebody from the community who could essentially connect the dots. So I'll run through the basic elements of our approach. Our approach begins by partnering with existing extension systems, public, private, civil society types of organizations that are already running farmer field school, demonstration plot, or group training sessions of some variety amongst farmer groups within a particular rural community. And essentially what we do is that we train 4 to 6 individuals from each district where these extension systems operate to produce short videos that are essentially by the farmers, for the farmers, where farmers are sharing their testimonials or demonstrating practices and really reducing sort of that disconnect between insiders and outsiders. In this case, the people who are appearing in the videos are very similar from those folks who are watching the videos. And what we found is that this process of introducing a camera into this one-to-one interaction or demonstration that might already be taking place actually improves the productivity of that interaction itself, because both the extension agent as well as the farmers really want to be seen as sort of role models within their respective communities and do a good job in terms of having these interactions, which allows us to produce a lot of content relatively quickly. Which is why over the last now 5 years, we've produced about 2,800 of these videos in 20 different languages, which average about 8 to 10 minutes in length. Now, these videos, as I mentioned, are produced by members of the community who we train on these skills of video production very simply, so that even folks who have limited literacy and maybe have never even touched an electronic device, maybe not even a mobile phone, can actually produce these videos. But at the same time, to make sure that the technical soundness of this content is maintained, we work with our partners as sort of domain experts to help review this content to make sure that it is sound. And once they review these videos and they approve them, these videos are uploaded online, so all these videos are available on YouTube as well as on our website. And in fact, as sort of mobile connectivity has been expanding and folks are starting to access these videos directly via their mobile phones or other devices, we have received about 1.5 million views to these YouTube videos. And on our website, we've actually categorized these videos based on various agricultural parameters like seasonality, crop, language, and the like, to make it much easier to search and browse through these videos than you would just kind of going to YouTube, where you just have a single search box to look through billions of hours worth of content. Now, obviously, most of the rural communities that we work with in places like in India and Ethiopia don't have the bandwidth to be streaming these videos directly to their devices. So the ways in which these videos are shared is primarily offline. Offline using this device, which is a Pico projector. It's a battery-operated mobile phone-sized device that allows you to project a 27 to 30-inch diagonal type of video in these places that have limited electricity and internet coverage. Now, these videos aren't just passively screened, but rather there's somebody from the communities who is presenting these videos to small groups of farmers. In India, we work with primarily women self-help groups who are already involved in microcredit and savings activities. And now, where every 2 weeks, these folks are coming together and watching these videos with this facilitator who is pausing, rewinding, asking questions, getting feedback, having an interactive dialogue along the lines of a farmer field school, but in the places and times that are convenient to them, at their houses, at school buildings. And because the videos are obviously on demand, the videos can be paused and rewound in multiple ways to make sure that the concepts are understood by the communities. Now, it's also important to note that these videos aren't just being screened randomly in a random set of villages, but rather embedded within the extension systems of our partner organizations, who provide a lot of mentorship and support to these village-level facilitators, and to also be able to take some of the feedback that comes back from these screenings to be able to inform the programs that might take place next. Now, this isn't just sort of a one-time screening that you may have come across in various types of mobile cinema projects that go from village to village to village to screen a particular piece of information. We found that that approach is great for generating awareness for particular campaigns that might be focused on a particular piece of information. But what we're really interested in is, like farmer field schools, to try to get folks into a learning cycle. So in one village, you may have 6 to 8 of these 10 to 15 person groups of women or farmer clubs who are meeting. And every 2 weeks, these facilitators are screening one new video. And the videos are targeted such that the video you see today will be appropriate for the next 2 weeks, such that if you're so inclined, you could actually adopt that practice. And so some of the practice that we feature are built around featuring those practices that would give farmers sort of a tangible reward that they can see first and immediately before some of those longer-term sustainable agricultural practices might be introduced to try to build some sort of trust and traction within these respective communities. Now, you can think about sort of the work that we're doing somewhat similar to the 1960s, which inspired the generation before me to study science and engineering in masses. Now, of course, these idols of astronauts that inspired this generation have been replaced with a very different sort of idol. India's Got Talent got about 30 million votes and 120 million viewers in its last season finale. But what we're trying to see is, how can you leverage technology and the form of these videos, where farmers are actually able to see themselves as role models within their respective communities, to make farming not a vocation of last resort, but something rather of choice. And essentially to build upon that 2005 survey that the Indian government ran, where they found that the most effective way in which information was being shared was amongst the farmers themselves. And so what we're trying to do is to build on those existing social networks of these communities and to leverage technology in the form of this asynchronous way of using projectors and cameras to be able to produce and share content that also has some sort of quality behind it. And at the same time, what we've also seen is that some farmers actually adopt these practices just so that they can be seen on video as role models within their respective communities. Now, in 2007 to 2008, we actually ran a 15-month study where we were trying to understand, how does this mode of extension compare with other possibilities? So our control group was this extension system which followed along the lines of the training and visit-based approach, but it was practiced by this NGO in southern India, where they had extension officers training farming communities on a variety of agricultural practices. The second intervention group was the digital green approach, where we still maintained sort of the human elements of the extension officers, but had at the village level these local mediators facilitating the screening of these videos amongst groups of farmers in those set of villages. Now, at the time, we weren't using pico projectors, we were using TVs and DVD players. We also tried a third variant called poster green, in which we ripped out the technology elements of the digital green approach, but maintained the human elements, so still having that local mediator at the village level, conducting meetings with farmer groups in those villages, but just using still frames from the videos to communicate the same set of practices. And we had a fourth variant called audio green, in which we ripped out the audio tracks as MP3s, put them on MP3 players connected to speakers, mediated by facilitators in that set of villages. And essentially what we were trying to understand was, how does knowledge transfer before and after each of these sort of modes of extension? What is the attendance and interest levels over this sort of 15-month study? And how many farmers actually adopt the practices that they see or hear about for themselves on their own fields? Here's some of the results. What we're plotting here is on the x-axis monthly figures of adoption rates. So basically the percentage of farmers that adopted one new practice as a result of one of these modes of extension. So in blue is the conventional extension system, which got about 15% of farmers over this 15-month study to adopt one new practice. In green was the digital green approach, white is poster green, and orange is audio green, which started a bit later. And what we basically found was this really key learning that having these local facilitators who are very familiar with the caste, political, social structures in the community were so important in terms of relating with fellow members of their community. And that's why you see this significant gain even between the conventional extension system and sort of the poster-based approach. In addition, the videos give you this novelty and repetitive ability where farmers are able to see an increasing number of farmers trying out these practices, benefiting from them, and saying that, well, there's this growing critical mass of fellow farmers who are benefiting from these practices and seeing value. Perhaps I can give it a shot too. What's interesting is that the first two questions that people ask when they see these videos is not about the return on investment or economics of these practices, but rather, what is the name of the farmer in this video and which village is he or she from? Really to be able to identify with their peers within these videos and determine whether this practice is of relevance to themselves. We've done some cost-benefit sort of analysis to look on a per village per annum basis that though we are increasing the overall cost of the extension system by introducing some of this equipment like these projectors and cameras, on a per village per annum basis, we're actually able to reduce the amortized cost of the extension system because we're essentially able to take that one full-time extension officer, which is the major cost driver in a lot of these extension systems, and now spread these folks over a larger geography when supported at the village level by these mediators who are conducting these screenings amongst these farmer groups. And then on an adoption rate basis, we found this over 7-fold increase in adoption rate. And on a cost per adoption basis, we found this increase in efficiency of 10 times per dollar spent. Now, the message isn't that we're out to seek to replace the existing extension systems. In fact, they are the basis for our whole activity. We wouldn't be able to even have an approach of producing and sharing videos without having sort of an existing extension system on the ground that has mobilized farmers, that has a frontline sort of cadre of facilitators who is already conducting trainings of some variety amongst farmer groups in some geographies. Over the last sort of 8 years, we've really scaled up this approach. We were initially a research pilot, as I mentioned, at Microsoft from 2006 to the end of 2008, where our scale was quite limited. From 2009 to 2012, we scaled up our approach to 1,200 villages, and have now, over the last sort of 2 years, begun working much more closely with the Ministries of Rural Development and Ministry of Agriculture in places like Ethiopia and India, and also with some private sector organizations that are involved in commodity trading or procurement from farmers, and are in the process of scaling our approach from 2,000 villages, where we are today, working with about 150,000 farmers who are watching one new video every 2 weeks, to scaling that up to about 10,000 villages by the end of 2015 through these partnerships. Now, the set of videos that these farmers are watching every 2 weeks, as I mentioned, is very specific and targeted based on the time and geography in which that practice is being shared. The major source of the information is primarily the existing extension systems that we partnered with, but we've been increasingly partnering also with various research organizations, including CIMMYT, to provide targeted input on practices or technologies related to wheat, for example. And it's not just sort of a one-way process of taking research and producing a video and distributing it kind of through this pipe, but rather having this mechanism of also capturing data about what practices farmers are actually adopting, as well as the feedback about what questions or issues farmers are actually expressing, that also informs research agendas and is done for every single farmer that we work with today. Now, the model that we have is essentially a hub-and-spoke approach, where these videos are being produced in each district, and then the videos are being screened in each village by these village-level facilitators, each with one of these Pico projectors screening these videos amongst these farmer groups. Now, if you're a farmer, 80% of the videos that you'd be seeing would be produced somewhere in your district. It need not be produced in your same village, but because of the importance of people being able to identify with perhaps not maybe the name of the farmer, but perhaps the village in which this person is coming from, as well as their cultural background, we have found that this localization is quite important. Also important to be able to have sort of accessible services that are able to translate the information into something that farmers can take action upon. There's no point, for example, to share a practice related to poultry production if there's no availability of chicks or a sort of a market for eggs or other things. But about 20% of the videos that we produce and share do come from outside districts that are kind of being shared across geographical boundaries. Now, as we've been scaling up our approach, as we're scaling now from 2,000 villages to 10,000 villages, it's become much more critical to think about how do you develop tools to capture this data and feedback and share content across these places that have limited internet and electricity. And so one of the first tools that we've developed is this data management system called COCO. It's essentially like a management information system, but it works in online and offline modes. And what we're capturing in this tool is basically individual records of each of the farmers about what videos they watch, what questions they make, and what practices they adopt, and whether they adopt that practice not just once, but whether they repeat that practice. And it works in online and offline modes, and it works across devices, whether a mobile phone, a tablet, a computer, or other type of device. Now, on top of this sort of database that we've built, we have a Nielsen ratings type of system for all the 150,000 farmers, which is open access, and where you can see the various practices that are most popular, least popular, most confusing, least confusing, which practices are being adopted repetitively, and how this splits across various geographies and time-based dimensions. All of the videos, as I mentioned, are available on YouTube, but what we've also built is online courseware built around these videos. And we're looking to try to build this into a library that can be used for training and certification of these frontline workers, which are often sort of the key drivers of all of these sort of extension systems. And to develop, for example, a collection of videos that is related to practices of wheat cultivation in a state like Bihar, and have some of these frontline workers kind of go through that course, take some assessments, and then evaluate whether they should be certified as a legitimate extension agent for wheat. And alongside these videos, we also have this data about how those videos were watched, how many farmers actually adopted the practices that they saw, and what were the questions that folks expressed when they watched these videos. And this is really valuable to inform the production of the next set of videos to align much more closely with the needs and interests that the communities might have. In addition, we've built a tool called FarmerBook, which is essentially a Facebook of farmers, where essentially we're exposing sort of this historical data of each of the individual farmers that we work with, such that, for example, this woman in this state of Orissa in eastern India, you can see the set of videos that she has watched over the course of time. She started watching videos in March of 2013, and you can see the set of videos that she watched since then, every 2 weeks. And you can see which of them she asked a question about or expressed an interest in with this sort of yellow icon, and which of the practices she actually adopted with this sort of green icon, and how that compares with fellow members in her self-help group. To really stimulate reflection in these self-help groups about why one woman may have adopted a practice versus another, and perhaps bring folks together. We've also been trying to see how we can take these sort of social networks of farmers that we work with offline and connect them with urban audiences. So we've built a game on Facebook, which is similar to other Facebook games like Farmville and Cityville that you may have come across, that are used by about 400 million monthly users on Facebook play these games. And we built a game called the Wonder Village, where essentially you build a virtual village economy, you play it with your Facebook friends, and along the way have to build this village together with real farmers who are those farmers who are on FarmerBook, to be able to essentially bring sort of some sort of connection between these communities where even in India there is this increasing divergence between rural and urban sorts of audiences. But just to kind of summarize, what we're essentially trying to do is, we're all familiar with sort of this notion or abstraction of the internet as being some sort of cloud where we're connecting our computers, our laptops, our smartphones to these various servers that various companies and others operate. But essentially, if you think about it, the main use cases that we're using for the internet is mainly getting and posting data. Either we're sending email or we're receiving email, either we're uploading a video onto YouTube or we're downloading or streaming a video from YouTube. What we're trying to see is how can you extend this notion of the internet into something that expands not just into places that have computers and connectivity, but to really think about how can you still have that benefit of having all this data and content into some sort of centralized repository, but have mechanisms for even offline asynchronous devices like simpler Nokia phones, projectors and cameras to be able to also sort of connect into this internet. Essentially exploding sort of this conception of the internet cloud to also encompass all these other types of platforms, whether they are newspapers or radio or television or the other, and be able to see sort of this benefit. The reality, just kind of going and echoing sort of the comments that Rob shared earlier, is that technology, in our case information technology, but I think the same is true as we've heard for agricultural technology, is really just kind of one part. The so-called developing and developed world divides aren't just sort of going to be crossed by sort of digital tools alone. Things like physical infrastructure, human capital, social institutions, and finance are also sort of important sort of precursors to the gains that tools like Google and Facebook and YouTube and video can provide. And so that's what we've really been focusing on, is to really partner digital tools together with organizations and individuals that are well-intentioned and competent, and to really be able to see how those tools can be used to improve the efficiency of extension services and broaden the participation of these communities so that they too can be able to take their one small step towards improving their lives and those around them. Thank you very much.